We've all heard about it. The tunnel, the bright light, meeting your relatives, and then never wanting to go back because you felt such a close emotion, you felt that experience on your skin. But what happens when you go back? Some people have lived to tell the tale. Near-death experiences today on HAUNT5VILLE. Hello, welcome. You look lost, but I think we found you. I think this is your type of channel. I have finally named this week, and look at this, the background is kind of looking hotter, right? It's looking more Halloweenish. Yes, again, it's the beginning of October, and I was just setting this thing up. But hey, welcome to the Halloween week. I have named it. It's 5 videos. It's HAUNT5VILLE, but like with 5 in it, right? As if like HAUNT5VILLE 5. Cool. Today we're talking about near-death experiences and a particular case that isn't spoken much about, and it's really fascinating because it's one of those things where you're like, what came first? You know, the chicken or the egg, right? Did the movies get all of these ideas about the tunnel, about the white light, about the relatives from the experiencers, which is what people experiencing NDE are called, or, you know, did the movie started first and then people kind of just try to embellish and dramatize it? You'll have to let me know what you think about that after watching this video. This video is about the case of Pam Reynolds. So she was the Atlanta singer and songwriter in the 50s, and in 1956 she was promoting her song, she was promoting her music, and she just suddenly lost her voice. And she was just thinking like, this is not me. It's like, you know, as if like I was to just like completely lose myself like while recording this video. And she was like, shit, this is not who I am or what just happened. She kind of soon realized that this is not like a temporary thing, she just actually can't really function. So immediately she goes to the doctor and they discover that she had a brain aneurysm. They were like, it's growing, it's leaking, like we need to actually remove it off your brain and you need to undergo a surgery urgently. And she does. She goes to this surgery and this is where everything happens. So they set her up on this gurney and they explain to her, listen, we're gonna put you in this comatose state. So you won't be dead, but it's the closest to being dead that you will be on. And we're gonna use this machine, I'll put the name of it on the screen, it's electro something gram. So this machine kind of shows us your brain cells. So basically shows us if you sort of start waking up and turning to be alive technically. So we're gonna place you in a gurney, we're gonna shut your eyes, and we're gonna shut them actually with tape as well. Again, just precautions, just to make sure you're not like awoken during the surgery. And we're gonna put these like earbuds, so these speakers, into your ears. And what those things do, they measure your brain stem. So like again, that gram machine thing is gonna, you know, ping us if there's any brain wave cells. So technically you're gonna be brain dead. Okay, Pam? Okay. You gotta remove your brain aneurysm, otherwise you can't continue with your life. Sorry. So she's like, okay, cool, yes, gotta have to do that. So she just goes into the operation and they proceed to do as I told you. This is where I'm gonna break it down as the things that we know about NDEs. So the tunnel, the light, the relatives, and then the returning to life kind of thing. So let's start with what happens when Pam Reynolds is comatose. Even before she was fully comatose, so even before they dropped her body temperature, Pam remembers her surroundings, so she kind of feels as if she was looking down on her own body and what was going on in the room. Remember, her eyes are taped shut. So she remembers that there's 20 surgeons around. Again, everything is disputable here, but surgeons might be coming and going during the operation, so yes, there might have been 20 people in that operation table before. But again, if you are undergoing a surgery, do you remember how many people? Are you counting people? Are you counting things? Or are you just like actually have a brain aneurysm? It's not like you are in the best of the capacity to remember exact amount of people around you. Then as she is looking down, then she remembers the sounds, and she remembers this sound that she describes as a sound of her electric toothbrush. And she realizes it's a saw that they are gonna use on her.
My electric toothbrush. If you can imagine the handle on my electric toothbrush.
Well, this is what is called the Midas Rex drill, and it is pretty much what Pamela described. And it's sort of in a toothbrush form. It is a saw that's used routinely in neurosurgery, and it's not something that is visible as you're coming into the operating room.
And then as she is looking down onto her body, they need for some reason to use the arteries on her legs. So basically need to like cut the arteries on her leg as well. And she hears one surgeon being like, hey, yeah, I can't actually use the arteries on this one, can you use her left leg? She remembers all of that, and this is when they are dropping her body temperature to like 60 degrees. And this is when she sees the tunnel for the first time. And she sees the tunnel and she sees the bright light. Now she remembers as if she is actually going through this tunnel and she is meeting her dead relatives.
A tiny, tiny little pinpoint of light, as if it were way far away. And I went toward the light. And as I began to get closer and closer and closer, I started to discern my grandmother. I started to see her, and she came to me, along with an uncle.
But as in so many other near-death experiences, Pam is stopped before she can enter the light.
I wanted to go into the light, but they wouldn't allow me to do that. There was a time when I realized it was time to return to the body, and my uncle took me back through the dark vortex tunnel-looking place to the body. And I did want to go back. I had my children. I did want to go back.
And she explains that while spending time with her relatives, it felt like as if they were nourishing her. Not like physically feeding her, but as if she was just being nourished by spiritually being with them. And then when the time came, her grandma kind of just looked up at her and she just really wanted to stay. But grandma kind of just like shook her head, and then her uncle brought her up to the end of the tunnel. People who are skeptical are usually skeptical about this part of the story, so the stuff that she said she heard or has seen, because again they're like, there is this thing called anesthesia awareness, and everybody skeptical about NDEs uses that to explain it, because they're like, hey listen, they're flatlined, they're just using stuff that they have seen before the surgery, so they are just kind of like embellishing it, dramatizing, and maybe just remembering, hey, this is like the last sound that I have heard as I was dozing off. But why would they be using things like the saw just before she was to be knocked out? Like they would only use that as she was comatose, and obviously her eyes would have been taped shut at that time. And again, why is she comparing it to the electric toothbrush? So there's kind of like both sides of the story. So people are saying that yes, others kind of use all those sounds because they are heavily impressionable just before that surgery, and then they're comparing them to stuff that they use in everyday life.
A lot of times in surgery, when you are under, you are not completely under, and this is a big problem for anesthesiologists. They have to make sure the guy is really under, because a lot of people, they're lying there and they're aware of what's going on, but they can't say anything and they're terrified. So now if the person's not completely under, he hears this and then recalls it later as part of this near-death experience.
She was comatose for about an hour, and then they were obviously kind of like raising her body temperature, she was starting to wake up. And this transition is usually referred as a life review, or what you see in the movies is that flashback where like the whole life flashes before her eyes. She didn't experience that, so again, kind of like speaks maybe to the credibility. Em said the pullback kind of moment was when she heard Hotel California playing. Remember, she's still comatose in this moment. She technically shouldn't be hearing what music is playing in this operation room. She remembered this particular line, you can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. So this is the story. Now let's go into like why it could be true or why it could be false, so sort of pros and cons of it. And then I'm going to mention another person where I can actually physically kind of see the differences. So the most common argument for it to be true is A, how people have changed their lives, but B, like what you and me are kind of looking for here is something factual, and that is that people could confirm every single thing, like the saw that sounded like an electric toothbrush, the Hotel California thing, the actual amount of surgeons in the room, that arteries story as well. So why not believe it? And every single experiencer that people have interviewed, including actually famous Tracy Morgan, so the comedian, and while researching this, I actually looked at like his comedy sketches now and then, how they were before, and then like what they are now. And yes, now he does, for example, talk a lot and base everything on this experience. However, it just sounds like more profound, more spiritual, like you can really see how it has changed his life. And you can see the comedy as well has changed in them. But bringing it back to Pam and every other experiencer, in every case, first of all, you can't actually do case studies on this, right? For obvious reasons, you can't actually just put people comatose for any reason unless they have an actual aneurysm, or unless they have been like in a certain accident. Again, they have to operate on them. For those of you skeptical of this, well, there is plenty of them, and the usual explanation for them is the anesthesia awareness. So, as I mentioned, Pam did say that she remembered most of the sounds and what was going on in the room, while she still wasn't fully flatlined. She was still like, her temperature was dropping. So people say this is called anesthesia awareness. And all of these things can be explained because the person's brain hasn't fully stopped working. Once it stops, she shouldn't have actually heard or remembered anything, which again kind of appears to be untrue. But okay, let's stick to this story. There is this anesthesiologist, Gerald Warlow, and he actually kind of investigated this case and just tried to debunk it. So he said maybe the speakers, you know, the earbuds weren't as tightly fit into her ears. The actual gurney look, so the actual operational table, would have been acting as a speaker technically. So as if it was reflecting sounds and making her actually hear this better and making it sound louder, making it feel like, yeah, she was actually hearing, you know, all these buzzing noises, the saw, the toothbrush and everything. And then he was like, well, what about the actual saw? And he said, well, this is kind of like a very similar saw, looks like an electric toothbrush and sounds like it. And at that time it was being used by every single dentist in town. So she was just placing all of these memories and putting them into this picture while she is kind of dozing off and listening to the sounds. Now, skeptical or not, you might wonder, why doesn't it happen to everybody? Why are there not like thousands of stories of people talking about their NDEs? And by that, why do some people then experience it, whereas the others do not? And again, this is a very murky area, so the answers aren't just straightforward. You might just be a more spiritual human, you might just want to believe in certain things, you might be religious, you might not fear death. That's another thing that I have read. But what is certain is that there is something more than physical happening here. There is something spiritual, something mystical. Because there is a machine that is measuring her heartbeat, her brainstem cells. So why wasn't that machine picking up on anything? Because there are obviously different things that we can't explain, like you can't actually physically trace, I don't know, an alien abduction or UFO appearance. However, with this one, you actually have a machine that people trust. You have the surgeons in the room, you have human presence, you have the arsenal of these medical devices that are there to measure every single thing that happens to you. And yet NDEs continue to occur. I'd love to know what you think about NDEs. Are you more or less skeptical after hearing this story? If you look at any case, actually just look at maybe Tracy Morgan to start off with, just at like his comedy before and after, because I'm just astounded. It's like a completely different person, and he has himself said that like after his experience, he just feels more physically connected. He just lives his life like completely differently. He loves people, he just loves to hug everybody. And he said this is what people are created for, this is what humans are created for, to love and care for each other. And that was his revelation after these near-death experiences. But what do you think about this? Are you skeptical, and if so, why? Or like, do you actually believe in this? And then again, if you believe, why do you believe? Why do you believe that it might happen to you? Is it because of something spiritual to you? Is it because you feel like you are more connected to death and you want to see your relatives, and that is sort of like the hope that you have? Because I think that might be for most of us, that you are like, hey, I actually want to connect to this dead relative. And I've seen in movies, I've heard under NDEs, like I've seen that this is possible. So let me know down below what you think. This is yet again the second case for this week, because it's one of those that just haunts my brain. Just, this is why it's in HAUNT5VILLE. It is most definitely not talked enough about. But that's where I'm gonna leave you, and I'm gonna see you here tomorrow. Be here. I'm gonna talk about another interesting subject with this like cool setting. Maybe I even ramp it up a little bit more. Can it be better? Can it? Okay, cool. Jesus. So for now, I have nothing else to tell you. Nothing else to say. Staying alive. Staying alive. This is not how you enter. This is not how you exit the video, god damn it. This is not how you exit a video, Maja. That is how you exit a video, bitch. Yeah, bye guys. Ooh, bye guys.
If death is the worst thing that happens to us, what an incredible thing. If at the end of our lives this is what's going to happen to everyone, I don't see the problem. I really don't get it. I fear pain, but I don't fear death.